Welcome everyone to another episode of Trust the Process (TTP). You know me. I'm the one of the hosts with the most, Lucas Lima, first year rep for the Rotman Sports Business Association. Here with me from the last episode is Praneet. What's up,
Hey
Praneet?
everyone, Praneet here from Rotman Sports Business Association as well. And Lucas, right back at you.
Awesome. Guys, Jason couldn't make it today. It was very sad news. So we went digging in Rotman's backyard and we found someone who's actually got a lot to tell us. So his introduction would be, have you ever wondered who who told Andrew Wiggins to stop shooting threes and to dunk more? Or who maybe, told Jamal Murray, take a step back, shoot a three. Here we have the brains of Canada basketball, and here to tell us more about his career in sports is Phil. I can't pronounce his last name, but he is the brains of Canada basketball. The stat man himself.
Lucas, thank you very much. Praneet, good to see you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate that flattering introduction, even though it's entirely false and I didn't do any of those things, but appreciate it. Excited to be here.
Take the credit. Have you ever seen Brian Scalabrine talk? He said in 10 years, he's going to be telling his kids he was the MVP of the finals. If we start the narrative now, Jamal Murray is going to think it.
Listen, Brian Scalabrine could get it done on the basketball court big time, so we'll give him a little bit of love there for that. But no, I appreciate that. Excited to be on with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So today, our first segment, we're going to start with a little, bouncing some sports news around. I like to call this little shindig dollar signs between four lines. So we're going to be talking about the NBA and how they've been talking about how they're going to approach the new season. So basically, guys, the prompt is they've been partnered with Facebook and they're trying to figure out ways to engage fans. They're going to use 5G network. They're going to use, virtual ads. I just wanted to know what you guys thought of how teams can use this space going forward. So I'm going to kick it to our, first timer here, Phil, who by the way is an RSBA rep. So shout out there, Phil.
Thanks, Lucas. Yes, shout out evening class of 2023, Rotman. Big shout out. It's really exciting. It's going to be so important, I think, for these teams to kind of figure out ways to really make an impact on their bottom line, honestly, because of they say NBA the revenue is about 40% ticket sales, right? So when that gets taken out of the mix, are these teams able to leverage the new technologies and really bring their fans closer? I remember there was an article Mark Tatum mentioned, over 90% of NBA fans will never set foot in an NBA arena. So how are they using these new technologies to leverage, new opportunities and really bring fans close to the action? If 5G can provide more bandwidth, it can really big fans. And one of the biggest things I've noticed too is these technologies are really cool, but if you're sitting courtside and it's very grainy and you can't even tell what's going on with the players, you don't know who's on the court, you don't know what's going on, you're going to turn back to more traditional ways. So if 5G can, narrow some of that gap and we actually feel like we're involved on the court with what's going on, it's going to be a game changer. I'm really excited for it.
Awesome. Praneet?
As someone who watches and loves watching sports from behind a television screen, I think this is great. I always want to have that experience of sitting courtside and being able to experience it, on the ground level, especially seeing what the players are seeing. I've been doing that a little bit on NBA 2K recently, just to kind of get the feel for that. And I think it's incredible what they've been able to achieve with that. I have tried the Facebook Oculus, and it's absolutely incredible. The technology that they've kind of brought in there, how realistic it is. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that, especially with the graphics improvements that they've also done from a gaming standpoint. So I'm really excited in terms of what the NBA can do with this, and definitely I'm going to be one of the first people in line looking to get my season ticket virtually.
For sure. And I think it's really interesting because I think it's even more attractive to people who've never had the opportunity to sit courtside. And it's going to be very interesting how they play it with the marketing aspect, right? Because they have, during the NBA bubble, they had virtual ads that are basically projected onto the court. And I think that this really gives the NBA and its partners the opportunity to do more segmented marketing, knowing, who's using the Oculus and maybe directing that marketing towards them can add a lot of value to a business and to a team, and also for fans who are consuming the product. And to make it even cooler is you can sell it with health insurance for your eyes because we're gonna have a screen like 5 feet away from our eyes, so that's gonna be nice. Can't wait for all of us to have to wear glasses with like me.
Yeah, no, it's an opportunity. I mean, one thing though, it's still pretty expensive, like $300 for a headset, right? I mean,
Of
that's
course, of
the
course.
price has been reduced recently, and I think that's kind of what they're going at, US, but they still need to figure out how they're going to really grab that, new group, young NBA fans that consume games in bits and pieces. They're not sitting through the entire thing. How are they really able to grab everybody and bring them along for this new ride of the virtual fan experience? Because it's nice to have 5G and it's pretty cool, but there's still a lot that they need to figure out, I think, in terms of that experience part.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some sort of like a pilot program before they roll it out across like for everyone essentially. But it was great to see like what they were able to do with the bubble in terms of bringing fans in through like different
Virtual stands.
I think it was Microsoft Teams that they were using as well,
Yeah.
and being able to do that. And I think that's where the future is going to be. You're not always just going to have people, present in stadiums physically, but you're also going to have them virtually available. And I think you said it, right on in terms of the new generation of kids, essentially.
Yeah.
The Gen Zs, I think they absorb this technology a lot more than somebody, maybe
Yeah.
from our generation or from generations before. Sitting in front of a television is more traditional, I guess. So I think from that standpoint, I can see them, being able to make stronger relationships with teams moving forward as well.
For sure. And what's interesting is that with this whole discussion, you really tap into something that especially the younger generation really wants, which is kind of like, being able to hear what players are saying, being
Yeah.
able to know like what's going on in the court. Like, maybe LeBron's telling, D-Wade some smack while he's like courtside and you want to hear it. Like you want to hear these things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, or maybe it's, I don't know, Steph Curry telling Giannis like, bro, like, hook us up, like come over to Golden State. Like, we got you. You want your brand value up there? You want some stocks in like some random Silicon Valley companies? Come over. You saw what KD's got going on. Like I think.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah. So they you can tap into like that cool stuff, and I think it kind of like progresses into what the NBA is also doing with Snapchat, and you can see how they're leveraging all these social media platforms because they're already huge on the end on Twitter, right? So they're also using Snapchat to like create more original content to go behind the scenes so people can see what's going on. Draft day coming up, that's huge. The experience that we've always had has been through a TV screen, but now we can see maybe what James Wiseman is doing when he gets up and how he's getting ready. And these types of content really create affinity between player and team, and or player and fan, and that's a whole nother dimension that's really has to be explored, is like that personal affinity that people have to specific players.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be great for the draft. I think in general, I don't know if you guys saw like how they did the NFL draft in the summer, where they had camera equipment set up at all of the GM's houses and coaches and things like that, where you have Cliff Kingsbury, look like some mafia king, in his mansion in Arizona. That was a really nice house with the mountain in the backdrop. And then you had, Bill Belichick in his cottage somewhere,
his dog
making the picks.
We
know New England's doing so bad today.
It's so interesting, guys, and like the NBA specifically, this season never really stops, right? Like you have, even while the playoffs are going on, huge percentages of people they don't even care about the play. They're like, where's KD gonna go? Where's Kyrie gonna go? It's like the playoffs are still going on, and we're talking about all this. And then as soon as it's over, you have the draft coming up, and you have free agency, and it's like a nonstop. They've really been able to make that a 12-month thing. Sorry?
Summer League's huge now. Like
Summer
people
League's
like
grown. Yeah.
Like
you have sellout games, Zion versus RJ in the Summer League in Vegas.
Yeah, like they're huge. Shout out Canada.
Shout out Canada, man. 21 NBA players last year and counting.
Or in the whole, you mean in the whole league?
In the whole league, yeah. 21 Canadians in the NBA last season, so
amazing.
It was an exciting year. Crazy.
Going on up. Yeah, so moving on to the next topic, guys. I feel like we're starting to dive into some interesting conversation with the NBA. I was wondering what are your guys' thoughts on some of, contracts, free agents? I feel like some hot takes are fizzling over towards Praneet, maybe.
I'm ready for Praneet to kick us off. Come on, man.
Oh, I
What do you
want to
think?
see Russell Westbrook with the Clippers. That's what I really want to see.
Ooh.
I want to see Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook in one team, because either that's going to be the biggest implosion of the year once again, or it's going to be the greatest success story, and Clippers are finally going to have a champion. That's what I want to see.
Well, if somehow they can make the money work, that would be a fascinating sequence of events that would lead to an implosion and no championship for.
That's original content that I want to see.
I mean, look, that would be crazy. It's funny though. It's like, he's an all NBA player very recently, and how many teams are really jumping up now to kind of, pick him up? Where you're hearing Charlotte, maybe you're hearing Orlando is in there a little bit, but for the most part, teams are like, yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
look like there's that much
Well,
interest.
that's the thing. It's his contract, right? And I think Lucas, you said it best. Like, it's the worst contract in the NBA.
Yeah, I stand firm by it, unless you dislike Tobias Harris, which fine, valid for you. Like, I dislike that contract too, $180 million. But $200 million for a player that can't shoot free throws. His best component of his game is his effort, and it's still there, but he can't translate it into results as much as he used to. And now it's just the game has moved a little bit away from him, where even they guarded him the same way they guarded Dort from the Thunder. Like,
Yeah.
that says everything. He's not worth.
I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult for him. The one thing, to not just throw on bad news. I mean, if we look at this past season, Russell Westbrook, between like January and March of 2020, it was maybe the best stretch of his career, right? So you could definitely make the argument that, there's something there, that can still bring value to an NBA team. But I think the fact of the matter is that if you look at those numbers and you see 44, 47, it's like, whew, I don't think you can kind of, and it's not like, okay, you say, well, you bring him in, he'll sell some tickets. Well, no one's
There's no
selling tickets in 2020 and 2021, unfortunately.
Unless you're MJ, then you just want to sell shoes.
Hey, fair enough.
And Russ is a Jordan player,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I think that's kind of where the Charlotte links comes in, where MJ, he thinks it's going to be good for the Charlotte brand to have somebody who's kind of made in the same mold as him in terms of all hard, giving it his all, and having somebody there. But I'm with you guys. I think the key issue with Westbrook and his contract situation definitely doesn't help is I think he needs to be aware that he's not going to be the lead option on any team he goes to, especially that's one that has championship like aspirations.
Yeah.
He's only going to be either a second fiddle or a third fiddle on certain teams, and he has to kind of play to that level itself. Like, he has to do things that are right for the team and not to stat pad his own like triple double stats or whatever.
Yeah. Can I give you guys another free agent?
Yeah, hit us.
Toronto, Fred VanVleet, absolute legend. As a Toronto fan, I think we might as well come out straight and say it. There's a little bit of bias there, but what he's sort of been able to do in his 4 years in the league and come up from where he started, a little bit third point guard behind Kyle Lowry. He's coming in and playing in the G League, and he's putting in his reps there, winning a G League championship, and then all of what he's been able to do over the last couple of years. He's obviously looking to get paid, well deserved, but I think it's going to be interesting to see, are the Raptors able to bring him back? If they do, what does that look like financially? Or is another team, whether it's, is it New York, is it whatever, Phoenix, whoever else might be looking to kind of improve their point guard situation? What's that going to look like? I think that's really interesting. What do you guys think?
I feel like he needs to go out there and get paid. Like, that's what he said, so that's what I'm gonna say. Boy needs to get paid, because it's not often that you have that opportunity in the NBA. So if you have to go to the Kings and get paid, I feel like, he's got the championship. That's great. But, like, he's not going to be a $30+ million a year player. He's probably going to be maybe in the 20 to 25 range, right? Like, for context, Cody Zeller makes $14 million a year. Like, he's god awful. Sorry, Cody, if you're watching, regular listener, I know. Um, he's gonna be in that range, and he's not gonna be the best player on the team, but he still needs to get paid. Like that's
Sure.
the point. Like he needs to guarantee his financial future, and like at the end of the day, you need to look out for like as a player, you need to look out for yourself, right, Praneet?
Yeah.
You'd sign
Yeah,
that contract.
in a heartbeat. If somebody paid me like 14 million or whatever that was to like just stand there and look pretty on the basketball court or on the bench, I'd do it for sure. Sorry, Cody. But no, I'm with you guys. I think what Fred has achieved, he definitely deserves to get paid. I think looking at it from the Raptors' perspective, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense for them to pay Freddie because I think what you're seeing now is Freddie's peak, and clearly, where the Raptors are today, it's not enough. They need another superstar, somebody in the same mold of a Kawhi Leonard. I know there's been rumors about Giannis and Giannis coming in 2021. So I think if Toronto really wants to, prepare for free agency in 2021, then they will not re-sign Freddie. And I don't think it makes business sense for them too. Why would they lock themselves into two long-term contracts with both Siakam as well as Freddie? At the end of the day, it doesn't leave any room for anybody on the bench who can be a stand-up performer, who they'd like to, retain and pay. So I think from a flexibility standpoint, in terms of the salary cap, I think it makes more sense for the Raptors to move on. I could see a situation where they do a sign and trade. Maybe to get some assets back because I think there's lots of teams out there who'd kill for a player like Freddie, a ball handler, solid, has a good 3-point shot. So I can see a lot of different options here. How Toronto handles it, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I don't see Fred VanVleet being a Raptor, unfortunately, for the upcoming season.
Yeah, that's interesting. My perspective has always sort of been, if you're the Raptors, it is really difficult to get very good players and retain very good players, especially someone that's
Kawhi,
sort of Kawhi, and
like
we haven't
he's
had
one.
many free agent signings coming across over the years, out of nowhere here. But so if you're able to develop one in your culture and you're able to grow and win a championship with him, and you have a certain level of that magic word kind of chemistry that gets thrown a lot around a lot. I think you almost have to bite the bullet in that case and deal with sort of what happens. So just to provide maybe a different perspective and argument for re-signing him. But how much longer is Kyle Lowry going to be the Kyle Lowry? I'd absolutely love that guy, but is it possible you see a little bit of a decline and then Freddie can maybe step into starting point guard role? It's interesting. Yeah.
It also depends on Pascal's development, I think, right? Like if he becomes the superstar, like that they really do think he's gonna believe or become, then then maybe you can commit to Freddie. And I think that's where you have as a GM, you look at the how the pieces make the whole, because that's what made this team this year so great, and what people talked about so much was how good they were even without Kawhi Leonard. But then playoffs come around, and then you saw Pascal struggling hard to get into rhythm, got into foul trouble. Boston really shut him down. And I feel like that's where you have to look as a team. Is they're gonna be like, all right, like is Pascal gonna be this player that we're gonna step up?
Right.
Is he gonna be top 10, top 5, or is he just gonna be a top 15 player?
Right. No, definitely. Yeah.
But let's talk about good stuff. Let's talk about the good. Like if I'm a team out there, you know who I'm trying to sign?
Christian Wood.
No way. No.
DeMar DeRozan.
No, Danilo Gallinari, bro.
Okay, hit us with it. What you got?
Bro.
Danilo?
Yeah, he's got length. He's got shooting. He's proven in the NBA. He's already said he'd take a pay cut to go somewhere. Hello, Boston. He could be a huge piece to a championship contender. Obviously we're not talking about stars, right? But we're talking about someone who's gonna lock up that second unit and be like, boys, give me the ball, get out the way. I'm a scorer. Like he was doing at the Knicks before he got traded to the Nuggets, and how he was doing at the Nuggets before he got traded to the Clippers, and so on and so forth. I think he's really, really good. Obviously, he's not amazing, but I feel like he could be a huge sixth man piece for a team.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. I think my one kind of red flag with Gallinari has always been his injury history. Um, he's disappointed me one too many times in fantasy basketball, so I'm a little bit biased that way. But at the same time, I think he's a great player. I actually heard him speak last year at the MIT Sloan Analytics conference. Really well spoken in terms of humble beginnings where he comes from, and really has the right mindset to play basketball at a very high and elite level. At least that's the sense I got from his conversation. But I agree. I think a team that's kind of willing to risk it all, like they definitely should go out and get him as a stretch three player or as a six man. And there's great potential there, and I think he can definitely be a valuable asset to any team he goes to.
Yeah, I like Gallinari a lot. I think he's a little bit underrated in terms of sort of what he can bring offensively to team. I didn't really like how he played kind of in the playoffs I think he'll get knocked a little bit by how he played in the playoffs for OKC. I also didn't really like how OKC played in the playoffs. There was a lot of standing around and not much ball movement. And, we were stationary and just kind of attacking. And, you'd see Gallinari mid post ups, fadeaways, isolation. And, that's really not what he would do on a contender if he was looking to add value there. And like you said, he's got to stay healthy. He did last year for the Thunder, so that was possible. I think the money is going to be tricky. I don't know if it's like a sign and trade and then maybe you can get that done, but he can score, man. Gallinari can score. There's no doubt about that. He can stretch the floor. He can shoot. He's interesting for sure. Absolutely.
You guys got any gems or any players you guys really, really like?
What do you think,
in
Praneet?
free agency this year? To be honest, not really.
It's a weird year.
I think it's a weird year. I think if I'm a GM and I'm looking at free agency in 2021, I'm gonna be trying to like clear as much cap space this year. So I might take on some bad contracts for like a year, get all these picks and things like that, and then work your magic next year. So I think that's what if I was an NBA GM, that's what I would be thinking, and that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, I think the Heat are going to be an interesting spot, don't you think, Phil? The Heat like they could attract a superstar in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting. We'd have to see sort of what their financial situation is, and maybe if they have a couple of contracts there they can get rid of and pick somebody up. I mean, they're also probably looking ahead to next summer and saying we're not going to sacrifice anything in the short term if they can potentially try and attract a certain Greek someone to South Beach. But there's not that many guys, I think, this year, and it's just going to be so interesting with a short turnaround. If it's after the draft, like they have 2 days, and I think you're going to see guys getting signed in early December and just showing up to training camp after the team's been practicing for a few days, and just kind of jumping in there. And I don't, there's nothing else that really stands out. I think we talked about Christian Wood briefly. I mean, he's not, someone that people are going to be too excited about us talking perhaps on a podcast, but he could add value.
He's a YouTube highlight reel.
I mean, there's just a bunch of player options, right? Like Anthony Davis declined his, but he'll most certainly be re-signing with the Lakers. Gordon Hayward, Jeremy Grant is another interesting one. DeMar DeRozan, Bogdanovic. I think another one to bring up might be Montrezl Harrell from the Clippers. He was awesome in the regular season. Really struggled in the playoffs, right? I mean, he brings
show up.
No, and I mean, look, he went through a lot.
Got abused by Jokic.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people will get abused by Jokic, and he's undersized. He's scrappy,
it's a bubble asterisk, right? Like because he was in and out the bubble. He was in and out the bubble. In and out of the bubble. I think he had some family things he was going on. I can't remember if he was one of the guys that got COVID, but he's going to look to get paid. He's reigning sixth man of the year. He obviously had a great off season, but who's really gonna bring him in, and who's going to pay? Is anyone going to pay, or is he going to go back to the Clippers? So I think that's one to kind of keep tabs on and watch. Bunch of other player options, but nothing that exciting, I think. Yeah, especially at the position he plays, right? Like he's an undersized center, which is, I guess, less relevant in today's NBA. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about the defending champs, the LA Lakers, you still need length. You talk about the West, you're talking about Jokic again. Like you have to think about you kind of see some length coming back in terms of like the 4-5 position that maybe 3-4 years ago with the Warriors wasn't so relevant or so important.
I love big guys, so I'm really excited that the return of the big playing a prominent role is what we're seeing here. So,
is there a stat
I think
for
the
that?
Warriors would disagree.
Hey, look, there's never one way to win. Is kind of the lesson here. And if you have what you have with the Warriors, you're probably going to do okay. But if you have Shaq on your team, I think you're probably not going to ask Shaq to pull up from three. You're going to plant him under the basket and give him the ball.
Can you imagine teaching Shaq how to shoot? Like, hey, big guy, come here, come down here. Let me tell you, feet towards the basket.
He was okay. He had a pretty good career. He was
decent. Some would say he was decent. Young kids out there.
Yeah.
Anything before the Suns days, kids. Before the Jabberwockies days.
He was on the Celtics for a hot minute, wasn't he too?
Yeah, he was in the.
He was.
Yeah, it's ring chasing.
But in order to catch up to Kobe.
Yeah, which he never did. R.I.P. Kobe. But like what I was gonna say, Phil, like I think we have something interesting with you because guys, as I was saying, he's the guy who drops stats just like that. Like you saw he was calling out contracts for Christ's sake. He was like, bro dropped like 20 points a game. He's consistent. He was healthy. Phil is the guy with the stats. I'll let Phil introduce a little bit of what his role is, but Phil does have a career in sports, and we are also a sports business club or association. And I feel like the kids, the kids out there and the young adults can learn a lot from you. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your career is and the job title, maybe a little bit of what's your job in a nutshell, I'd say.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks, Lucas. Appreciate it. So as you mentioned, I do work for Canada Basketball. So essentially, I manage analytics, strategy, and research for the men's national team program. So anything from across the board, from as early as our junior academy, which starts at grade 7 here in Ontario, all the way through to our senior national team. I sort of manage the analytics, video analysis, performance analysis, everything for those groups. So it's an interesting position because unlike a professional sports team, for example, we have many teams playing at the same time. Sometimes in the summers from U16, U19, a senior team, we have a junior academy. So you really get to impact and work with a broad range of athletes, a lot of different coaches, and it can get really hands-on because we're sort of a small organization. So you can grab a lot of different tasks, but at its very core, I'm sort of in charge of the analytics for the men's national team program. And I've been there for just over 4 years now. And I started my career in finance coming out of university. And then I was fortunate to get a position after 1 year of working in finance with Canada Basketball, and I've been there since then. And we've been trying to qualify for the Olympics for some time. Haven't done it since 2000. We were excited about this summer. We'll have to wait 1 more year and see if we can get in next year. But it's an exciting time for Canadian basketball, and I'm sort of excited and proud to be a part of it for sure.
Awesome. So you got out of school, finance major, and you went into Canada Basketball working finance and then moved to analytics. Is that right?
No, sorry. So I started working at a company called CI Investments after my undergrad here in Toronto. And then after a year with them, I got an opportunity with Canada Basketball to move right away into sort of the men's high performance when I took that analytics role. It was a new position for them. They hadn't had sort of a full-time performance analysis person involved before. There was a lot of consulting, a couple of part-timers involved in there, but it was the first foray into having that as a full-time position. So there's a lot of growth there too, both for myself and the organization as I sort of grappled with, bringing in new metrics and objectifying sort of some of the workflow and new data to help support decision making. But it's been an exciting ride. And like I said, it's really cool because you see athletes from when they're young. You follow them through their progression all the way to potentially senior team. Like RJ Barrett, was a part of our junior academy in 2012. And obviously is now in the NBA, has played for his senior national team several times. So it's exciting to be able to follow these athletes as they grow and progress, but it's also a gold mine of information because you've sort of had hands-on with them since grade 7 and really following them throughout. So it was a new position, but we've grown. We've improved a lot of the work, and excited for the next couple of years for sure.
That's awesome. And within like the organization itself, are you feeding the analytics to the coaches, or are you going straight to the players? How does that workflow go for you?
Yeah, so it depends again. Unlike a professional team that has a full season, we sort of operate in windows. We'll have a couple of competition windows. For example, if you're familiar with international soccer, they get together for windows over the course of the year where they play maybe 1 or 2 games and then go back to their team. So it's very similar, the qualification process that FIBA has created for the national team. So the way it works is generally, if we'll have a 2-week, let's say 3-week window of competition, we'll play 2 games. Leading into that, I'll support the coaching staff with preparation for the game. So we'll get a lot of scouts available on the other team. We'll follow our own players and I'll support decision making for roster selection, providing information, tracking these guys in their different environments. Once the team is made, making sure that everyone's sort of on the same page with any other information and data that they need. And then once we get into training camp, supporting some practices, I'm rebounding on the court for the players and they're going through drills. I'm acting, trying my best defensively as we kind of work on certain things. And then, but for the specific game plan, I'm supporting the coaches and the scout. And then coming out of that competition window, it's a lot of sort of, debrief. What did we sort of do in terms of the key performance indicators that we're interested in? How did we track in terms of our progression metrics that we wanted to achieve? FIBA's tough because it's such a small sample size. You're usually only playing a couple of games, unlike a full NBA season. So evaluation, you have to understand really the context of these games and understand sort of in terms of the process, not just some of the stats that you see. What is the process that you're looking to chart? And how did you do there? In terms of the players, the relationships evolved over the years that I've been there. So definitely I'm closer with some of them. We can speak directly on some things with others that might have not been involved as much. I mean, it is, communicating through the coaching staff, ensuring that if any other information they need is provided. But what's awesome about Canada Basketball is that we are a very small organization, and as a result, you have a lot of opportunities to impact a variety of different things. So everyone's hands-on and everyone's involved, and it's cool that way. Yeah.
So I have a quick question on that. So in terms of you saying that, you guys have really small sample sizes, and a lot of times the analytics and the statistics that you might have might not, paint the full story. So when you're working with coaches and scouts and you're looking at kind of the eye test versus analytics kind of debate, like where do you guys emphasize a little bit more? Like, do you focus more analytics heavy, say, when you have players who have a lot more data available, say through the NBA? Or with players, when you don't have that data available, are you focused more on just kind of the eye test and seeing how they perform in drills and what their impact is in scrimmage games and things like that? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's a great question, Praneet. So ultimately, look, the way I think about it is that analytics, quote unquote, data, it's a source of information that you're using with many other sources of information to help make a decision, right? So you have the data that you're providing. You'll also have your expert evaluations that you mentioned, sort of the eye test that are being provided. And along with all the information that you come together and you're on the same page in terms of what sort of the goals are and the areas of focus, the more you have sort of, as long as everyone's kind of understanding of the context and what's going on, it can sort of help support decision making in a positive way. To mitigate sort of the sample size question that you're talking about, for player evaluation, for example, if we're talking about roster selection for a national team, it is a challenge because you have a variety of different levels of performance across leagues. Players that might be playing, for example, in Germany. How do you necessarily compare the performance of those athletes to a player playing in France, to a player playing in the NBA, to a player playing in college? Over the years, we've created models to sort of, objectify and normalize some of those across different contexts. And you can see, for example, when a player is leaving one environment and going into the other, how does production change and all of that. So that's sort of one way of doing it. But strictly sample size speaking, ultimately, you got to do the best you can. We try and bring in as much information. So, for example, you always want to see what the players do when they were on a national team because role can change, often does.
Carmelo.
For example, if a player,
of course,
unbelievable FIBA player, I mean, obviously NBA legend and probably Hall of Famer, but his role did change. Thomas Satoransky playing in Czech Republic is sort of the straw that stirs their drink, whereas on the Bulls, it's a little bit more of a specific role that he's playing for them, right? So understanding the context, one thing that I always do, and I think this is very, very important for anybody that's working in data and analytics, and if anyone else is interested in that as a field, when you're going to decision maker and you're looking to present information, the last thing you want to do is start with the data, start with the numbers and lead the conversation that way. You want to establish sort of the terms of discussion. What are we dealing with? Establish a level of trust, and then use the numbers to support what you're making as your point. and everything has to be contextualized. And I always provide video to support anything that's being given because of that issue of sample size. You know, you maybe only have 2 games worth of data, and you could say one thing, but you can't really ever be conclusive with it. So this is what we sort of saw. So for example, you know, a mistake that some analysts might make is say, well, the numbers say this, so we should sort of do that. The numbers don't say anything, right? It's your interpretation of the numbers and how it's presented to the decision makers that's important, and understanding the context and then being able to really you know, realize what the keys are of what the coaching staff is looking to drive and the management is looking to drive, and be able to communicate on those terms helps the trust process. So for example, whenever I present, you know, if it's defensive transition numbers that we're looking to achieve and we have certain metrics, I'll usually provide clips to support that as well. You know, this is what the video is talking. These are some of the targets that we're looking to achieve. These are what we were in terms of the numbers. Maybe there's a gap there. How are we looking to address it? What were the results of this? Let's provide video evidence. And then, you know, coaches are incredibly, you know, able to identify those and run with them and figure out ways to bridge that gap in practice. So that's sort of how we think about the sample size. And it's just a reality of FIBA competition, but it's a challenge. It's a cool challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. For our listeners out there, I think the moral of the story is you really just got to trust the process.
Process is important. Incredibly well done, Praneet. Can we get producer? I listened to The Ringer, and you have Shay Strong saying, "Producer Steve, can we get a little
soundboard next time? Next time we get the soundboard."
There you go.
Phil, I wanted to ask you something, because you moved from a finance field into analytics, and that might be something that a lot of people are looking to do, right? So what are the skills that you felt transitioned from one to the other? And maybe you tell us a little bit about how you got into Canada basketball itself.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I did my undergrad degree at McGill University, and I played on the team. Shout out McGill. We will be having a men's name for our varsity sports probably coming out within the next year or so. So we'll see what happens there. But anyway, so I played for McGill for a coach called Dave DeVero for 2 years, and then Dave asked me to stay on the staff for the second 2 years, the second half of my undergrad there. And at the same time, I was fortunate because Dave was also the head coach of Canada's U16, U17 national team at the time. So essentially, he was like, "Hey, just do stats, you know, figure it out. If you want to stay involved with the team, do stats." So it was a lot of sort of self-learning. You know, it was an opportunity for me to stay involved with the team, which was awesome. A lot of my friends are still on the team. And when I graduated from McGill, Dave brought me to one of Canada Basketball's age group training camps, and that's where I met sort of the management at Canada Basketball. It's Rowan Barrett, Michael Meeks. And from there, I was able to establish a relationship, and I stayed on sort of volunteer basis over 1 year. Just anytime they needed any research work, any analysis, I would provide that. And then I was fortunate enough that through the Olympic Committee, they opened a position full-time in the fall of 2016. And then through sort of the work that I was able to do over the years with supporting them, I was fortunate enough to get that position and sort of moved on from there. But so that's kind of the trajectory path of things. And in terms of, you know, what's important coming from a finance standpoint, I like one of the key 2 things that I would sort of outline. I talked about one of them already: communication, whether that's verbal communication with the people that you're working with, but also how you communicate the information that you're collecting. You're not just going to give someone an Excel spreadsheet and say, "Here's the data," right? It's going to be very focused. And, you know, if I'm sure people that I have no experience in this, so please guys jump in if I'm talking nonsense. But if you're working in investment banking, for example, and you're supporting some sort of transaction, you're presenting PowerPoints, you're presenting decks, and a lot of the information has to be clearly presented, marked, beautiful. It's similar, right? You can't just give a bunch of numbers and expect someone to figure out what you're talking about. So it's, you know, figuring out how much information you want to look on the page. Everything has to be beautiful. It has to be appealing for the user to really want to dive in and look at it. So verbal and just kind of communication of data is crucial. The other thing, one of the things is you want them to engage with the data. You don't want to just persuade them and be like, "This is what I'm saying." No, let them kind of pick it up and make conclusions. It needs to fit in with the workflow that they already have, part of what's already going on in terms of a decision-making process, and sort of encourage discovery that way. The other thing I would say is sort of the attention to detail piece is critical. And I worked in client services and finance, and we'd often deal with client accounts, and we'd have to figure out what's going on and if there's any issues operationally that need to be resolved. You must have an excellent attention to detail when working in any role, obviously, but specifically within data and analytics. One funny story that I've heard before was obviously Nick Nurse is the head coach of our senior men's national team, and I had the opportunity to work with him last summer. And one story that he always told was an analyst with one of the teams that he was with once said, player X is shooting a really strong percentage from three, in transition, and coach is like, it's impossible. Like I've seen that. I can't believe it. Show me the numbers. Let's watch the video. So he goes to his video guys, and they pull up all the clips, and it turns out that that's not necessarily the case. So what was the difference? What happened was that analyst's definition of transition in the software and the program, the way he was coding it, was anything that happened within a certain amount of time on the shot clock. So for example, the first 7 seconds of the shot clock. You can't define transition in basketball as a temporal element, right? It's an advantage that happens in terms of the amount of players that are back in the court. So often what you would see is like this player on like a baseline out of bounds, like an end line of bounds, he would have like a shot within the first couple of seconds of the shot, but that's not transition at all. So it's like the context, the way you define the information that you're presenting, the attention to detail to be able to not just see the number, but go into the video and understand what you're presenting. I'd say those two are kind of the key elements to answer your question, Lucas, there. Yeah.
It's an awesome anecdote. Can you imagine Nick Nurse just like mad, like, what are you talking about?
You know what?
I can just see him like going crazy and just just being like.
He's one of the he's fantastic to work with, incredibly open to everybody's perspective and opinion, down to earth, always wanting to learn more, and kind of engage with any information that you're providing, as long as you know your stuff and you're ready to back it up, and gives everybody an opportunity to do so. So we do get a certain perspective on him. I think you can kind of see how down to earth he is in some of the interviews that he does, and he's real, man. That's the way he is in real life, and it's been really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the culture flows down from him, right?
Oh
like,
yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
He's where it starts.
He's where it starts, and I mean, the Raptors have done a fantastic job of sort of encouraging it through the years, even when he was, an assistant coach, and ultimately the players play a crucial role in that too. When you have Kyle Lowry, guys like Kyle Lowry, DeMar when he was here as well, played such a key role in that.
Too.
Still loves Toronto, like Fred VanVleet, all those guys, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol driving the culture. And I mean, the other thing that, culture gets thrown around a lot, like it helps to win. I think when you're winning, you have pretty good culture generally. Obviously, it'll be an impediment sometimes, and it's not always true. Yeah, so those two seem to go hand in hand, and we kind of mistake the two often, I think. But there's no doubt that he does a fantastic job with that group.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add is like I see him like during games, and if he's doing something and it's not working, and the Raptors are playing badly, he's not afraid to put his hands up, saying, "Oh, I made a mistake," and then change the system altogether. Whether it's changing zone to man-to-man, vice versa. And you see all these defensive schemes that come out of this, like, whole being able to adapt on the fly. And I think that's one of the greatest qualities that Nick Nurse has, is being able to adapt in these kind of like tense situations and making those decisions when he needs to.
That's maybe the single most important, one of the key elements, at least, of being a good coach and just being a good manager, right? Like, if we're taking a step back from sports and kind of from like a business perspective, like, you have to be adaptable. That's a great point. I fully agree, Praneet, definitely.
That's an awesome insight. Phil, before we drop off, I wanted to propose some analytics ideas for you.
I'm excited. Let's hear it.
So there's this metric that, not metric, but like this thing I'm working on called Fanalytics.
Okay, cool.
So like every time I'm watching the Celtics or the Raptors, like if I'm standing up, they play better. Like, fact.
Okay.
Can we use?
You've tracked this. What are the numbers? What do the numbers say?
So the numbers say that the 3-point shooting percentage is about 23% during the playoffs. Well, for the Celtics, right? Like, when the Celtics were playing the Raptors, we're shooting about 23% from three, and I was sat down, number went up to 30. OG hit the shot when I was sitting down. So
the sample size is 7 games.
Analytics is one. I'll let you keep that one for free. Take it back to Nick. Be like, Nick, saw the tape.
Look, I may or may not wear the exact same T-shirt and jersey every time the Raptors win a game, so I think I know where you're headed there on that one.
what I'm talking about. See, Fanalytics. I'm just saying. Think about it. Like every time I order a pizza, Papa John's pepperoni, no free ads, but free ads.
We Jack Armstrong here. Papa John's.
Exactly. Like that's what I'm trying to. Fanalytics. Just saying. And the other one that I was wondering, it's not really like a proposal, but it's a hope. It's like I've done my analytics and I touched the net 88% of the time. I'm wondering if I can still go pro.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. I think looking at the numbers,
no.
It's a hard no. It's a hard no. Looking at the numbers, and you never want to say the numbers say this, but my interpretation of the numbers would be hard no.
I'm a glue guy. I'm a glue guy.
Okay.
That's what I do. Like
when Udonis Haslem of
when Drake drops music, when Drake drops an album, I'm the one who plays it.
Listen, it's a tough time for intramural sports, but I hear the Hart House at U of T has a pretty good team for intra non-varsity, non-real intramural competition. I think that might be a opportunity.
And the last one that I was gonna lead into is like you should look into analytics and to like Drake dropping music and like winning. Just saying, like it coincides.
I think Professor Bernardo Bloom might have a little bit of an issue with the correlation and causation there, but we'll see.
It's Fanalytics, man. I hope.
But you know what is real? The after having birth of a child performance boom. Fred Van Vliet. That's real.
Oh yeah, guaranteed.
That's causation, not correlation.
That's just causing.
That's just like causation.
Philip Rivers is doing something wrong, man. He's still waiting for the kid to he's like, babe, another kid. Still not there yet.
In basketball, I don't know if it works in football.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, people have definitely turned this podcast off at this point.
I was gonna say, on that note, guys, I want to thank Phil Praneet for being here today. Phil, just to say one last time, what's your official position for Canada basketball?
Yeah. So performance analyst and database manager with the men's national team program in Canada basketball. Yeah.
Soon to include Fanalytics. Watch out, guys. This was Trust the Process, TTP. You know me, you know Praneet, you know Phil. We'll see you next time. Have a great one.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good night.